If you turn on the news on any given day, American politics looks like a system tearing itself apart. We see endless partisan friction, filibusters, and factions refusing to give an inch. This constant fighting has a very real, measurable cost. Entire federal agencies grind to a halt, national parks close, and hundreds of thousands of workers are sent home simply because lawmakers cannot agree on a budget. This frustrating, agonizingly slow pace is a deliberate feature of the American state, the core programming of the system itself. To understand why, we have to look at the people who built the machine. Deeply influenced by Enlightenment philosophers like Montesquieu, the Founding Fathers harbored an intense fear of concentrated, unilateral power. To them, an efficient government was a dangerous one, capable of slipping easily into tyranny. So when they sat down to write the Constitution, they deliberately encoded inefficiency directly into the supreme law of the land. They engineered a framework that forces decisions to be scrutinized, debated, and frequently delayed. Action is difficult by design, ensuring that individual liberties are protected over the speed of execution. The foundation of this system rests on dividing federal authority into three distinct lanes of power. First is the legislative branch, housed in Congress, which holds the exclusive authority to write and pass the laws. Next is the executive branch, led by the president, tasked with enforcing and administering those laws once they are written. Finally, the judicial branch, operating through the federal courts, interprets those laws to ensure they align with the Constitution. If these three branches operated in strict isolation, with total authority over their own domains, the government could act immediately. A president could decree a policy in the morning and enforce it by noon. But absolute speed is exactly what the founders wanted to avoid. Instead, they forced these independent branches into an inescapable web of mutual oversight. We call this checks and balances, a series of intentional friction points where the branches overlap and collide. For example, if Congress passes a bill, the president can veto it, but Congress possesses a countermeasure. They can override that veto with a 2/3 supermajority. We see this tension play out when a president formally rejects a priority of the opposing party, forcing lawmakers back to the drawing board. Meanwhile, the judicial branch watches both. Established early on by the landmark case Marbury versus Madison, the courts hold the power of judicial review, allowing them to strike down both legislative statutes and executive actions if they violate the Constitution. And yet, those powerful federal judges and key executive officials cannot simply take office. They must first survive the grueling scrutiny of Senate confirmation hearings, keeping both the courts and the presidency tethered to legislative approval. When severe abuses of power do occur, Congress holds the ultimate legislative mechanism for accountability, the constitutional authority to impeach, try, and remove a president or a federal judge from office entirely. This dense network guarantees that any major policy or appointment must survive a brutal gauntlet of institutional rivalry, making unilateral dominance nearly impossible. The question we face today is how well an 18th century blueprint holds up against the extreme political pressures of the 21st century. When intense political partisanship dominates the system, the founders' goal of careful compromise often devolves into toxic gridlock. Instead of refining legislation, competing factions use these checks to halt decision-making entirely. The modern era has also exposed vulnerabilities in the balance of power itself. Over the last century, presidents have increasingly expanded unilateral executive authority, frequently relying on executive orders and independent military actions to bypass a deadlocked Congress. There is also fierce ongoing debate regarding the judicial branch. Critics consistently question whether the courts are overstepping their bounds, acting as active policymakers from the bench rather than neutral interpreters of the law. Even with these internal expansions, the core architecture still forces a standoff. Courts continue to invalidate executive overreach, and the legislative power of the purse remains a heavy hammer. For over 200 years, this persistent institutional rivalry has successfully blocked the path to absolute dictatorial rule. That persistent political gridlock is the audible mechanical friction of a system specifically engineered to trade efficiency for liberty. In Washington, the sound of the system working as designed is the sound of disagreement.